Adam Schiff now joins the chorus, says Donald Trump has to be removed from 2024 ballots, and he's not alone. This issue really does give me some concern because I feel like I can hear the volume slowly turning up. The frog in the boiling pot, they just keep amplifying the temperature slowly but surely. And people on both sides of this are now jumping in. Should Trump be removed under the insurrection clause under the 14th Amendment? We've talked about where this originated from. Some law professors wrote an article. It went over to Judge Ludwig, one of the same guys who testified in front of the fake January 6th Select Committee. That went to Lawrence Tribe, who's this so-called legal scholar, whatever. And he spread it around on MSNBC. It showed up in the Republican debates with Asa Hutchinson talking about removing Trump. Now we've got senators talking about it and representatives and secretaries of state like Jocelyn Benson, who was very instrumental in Michigan in 2020. And we saw a lot of lawsuits here with her name on it. She's back and she's entertaining this concept. And so this is a very precarious thing that is happening. Now, Adam Schiff, before we listen to this clip from this guy, he went and hung out with Jen Psaki, you remember her, and they have a conversation about this, but it's very important to remember that Adam Schiff has been censured. Now, I want to be very transparent about this. You know, if we're going to be sharing a clip of him, it's important you know everything about the man. And only a few people in American history have ever been censured. Adam Schiff is one of them, which is really just a shameful thing. He should be very ashamed of himself, feel very bad, and because he's bad. And this is what he says.
Joining me now is Congressman Adam Schiff. He was an impeachment manager during Donald Trump's first impeachment trial.
Let's volume this up just a smidge. Jen Psaki needs to turn it up a little bit.
And was a member of the House Select Committee on January 6th. Congressman Schiff, thank you so much for joining me on Labor Day weekend.
Great to be with you.
Thanks, Jen.
You followed this all so closely, given all of your various roles in Congress. Were you all surprised as you were watching Mark Meadows' testimony of anything he had to say on Monday?
Not surprised so much by what he had to say as the fact that he said it at all, that he felt the need to take that gamble, that big gamble, by taking the stand. I think it's an indication both of the fact that he feels he needs some kind of a Hail Mary to escape a potential conviction, but also that if he were successful in removing the case to federal court, he has the potential to knock it out completely by arguing immunity. You know, listening to that testimony, reading what he had to say, I think it's a very weak case, both for removal but also for immunity. If actions...
I don't think so. I think the judge is going to remove it. And I think we were seeing that pretty clearly in some of the filings last week. And they're petrified about the removal, so they say, because they say that Trump is not going to be in front of the cameras if it's removed to federal court. No, I don't think Trump cares about that at all. Trump is holding up his mugshot t-shirt like, yo, go to my website and buy one. So I don't think he cares about that. His polls go up every single time we get to see this corruption. And I, for one, would love to see Big Fanny out there trying to make an opening argument. It would just be hysterical because we saw her press conference and that was also a joke. So it would be just a lot of fun to watch the whole thing just collapse in front of all of us. And I think the real reason they're concerned about the removal is because it would ultimately lead to the possibility of immunity that means Trump is innocent. And they would not like that to happen at all. That'd be pretty bad precedent. And if it's removed, it goes outside of Fulton County to the rest of the state and you get a much bigger jury panel. And that is a much more favorable situation if you're a criminal defendant like Trump in a blue district. That's why they're freaked.
Of a chief of staff to try to subvert an election, to try to overturn an election, to try to defraud and violate the laws of a particular state are somehow within the job description of a federal chief of staff, then the Constitution becomes, in Justice Jackson's words, a suicide pact. And as he wrote in that dissent, that famous dissent, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. It shouldn't be interpreted in such a way as it.
They're so dramatic. They have the most colorful language. It's suicide because Mark Meadows went to go ask questions about what was happening in Georgia. Are you nuts?
Would negate itself. But I think he feels it necessary to take such a profound risk with his testimony.
Not risky.
Well, given, as you just said, a profound risk that he took by testifying for more than 4 hours, that now can all be used by other prosecutors. Did you hear anything that might be useful for Jack Smith and his team as they're working to put together their case in prosecuting the federal election interference case?
Mostly the absurdity of the argument that he did this as part of his role in order to determine what further reforms might be necessary to election laws or to see that the election law was faithfully carried out. That, I think, will be very successfully mocked during the course of the trial. And it should be. It's absurd. But I think he was, by and large, pretty careful about what he was saying, using, repetitive words and phrases, no doubt, counseled by his attorney. But
yeah, they didn't get anything. And it's going to be very curious to watch if the trial actually does happen, how much stuff is just no longer in people's memory. People's memory starts to fade after a couple of years, and they've waited a couple of years to bring this case. And you might have an issue with that, but certainly the Democrats have that problem. Remember when Michael Sussman was being prosecuted for faking an entire hoax with the FBI, the Christopher Steele fake dossier? When Mark Elias took the stand during that trial, Mark Elias, who's a very smart guy, went to good schools, had built an entire legal practice prosecuting Republicans and liberal causes, essentially, is an individual who just forgot a bunch of stuff. And he was on the witness stand. And so Mark Meadows, I'm sure, is going to be able to do that too. It's going to be very difficult for people to remember things.
Just the absurdity of the argument, I think, will ultimately be used against him.
Yes, it's such a good point. It's worth telling everybody, reminding everybody, it is not your role as the White House Chief of Staff to work to overturn an election, to state the obvious. One of the things, Congressman, that stood out to me was when Meadows was asked directly by state prosecutors if he had any role in coordinating the fake electors. He said, "No, I did not." The prosecution then submitted into evidence an email that Meadows sent to Trump campaign advisor Jason Miller.
Now, I want to see the part where he's asked about, let's see.
For president. Now, this hasn't been tested in our system before. Do you think, what is your thought on whether that's a valid argument?
14th Amendment. Legal scholars say Trump can be removed on their own. There's no due process. There's no trial. There's no case that happens. Secretaries of state, people who run elections in various states, can just on their own decide to remove Trump off the ballot. Schiff, what do you say?
I think it is a valid argument. The 14th Amendment, Section 3, is pretty clear. If you engage in acts of insurrection or rebellion against the government, or you give aid and comfort to those who do, you are disqualified from running. It doesn't require that you be convicted of insurrection. It just requires that you have engaged in these acts. It's a disqualification from holding office again. And it fits Donald Trump to a T.
Look.
I think this will be tested when a Secretary of State either refuses to put him on the ballot or puts him on the ballot and is challenged by a litigant. I would imagine it will go up to the Supreme Court. And
so it is going to happen, okay? A Secretary of State is either not going to put Trump on a ballot, and Trump or the RNC or somebody's going to have to sue to get on it, or he's going to get on it and he's going to be sued to be removed off of it. And we're going to go to Jocelyn Benson in Michigan next. She might be a prime candidate for option one.
That's the big question mark through all of this, which is, what will the Supreme Court do? There are prominent constitutional scholars as well as prominent progressive scholars who believe that he should be disqualified. But will the court take that step? Ultimately, only time will tell. But I do think it is a very legitimate issue. By the clear terms of the 14th Amendment, he should be disqualified from holding office.
Congress is not returning for a couple of weeks.
Amazing. So they don't want you to even have the option. They want Trump to be removed by some people like this woman who just decide on their own, this is what we need to do to save American democracy. You don't get the right to vote in order to save America. This is Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State from Michigan. She was very active in 2020. We covered many lawsuits with her name here. And her entity as a Democrat, right, her Secretary of State's office was sued by other Democratic groups, and then they would settle the case and they would have better voting terms for the Democrats. And this all happened during COVID, and they used the COVID excuse to make these changes. Democrat sues a Democrat, they settle, oh, you're right, our laws are racist or whatever, they're discriminatory because of COVID. And then they would settle the case, change the rules. After the election would happen, people would challenge what they changed. Too late, election's over. So remember, even if Trump is removed, let's say he's removed and they can't get it settled before an election or something, right? Sometimes they don't even care about what happens in the litigation, as long as they can just create an environment that is more favorable for them to win. So it's not about the outcome of the legal case. It's about what they are able to create in the environment during the pendency of the legal case. And if this is just about even just, causing Trump legal fees and money, he's got to hire lawyers to put him back on the ballot, to take him off the ballot, defend against taking him off the ballot. And so it is just continued lawfare, even if it is never successful. But I think that people like this, Jocelyn Benson, are going to try to do it. They'll be heroes to the Democrats. They'll probably get promotions, and they might cause a shift in the election themselves.
As the election interference probes into former President.
So here is Tim Kaine, a senator, also on board with this.
Purpose at a particular moment, and that was to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power as is laid out in the Constitution. So I think there's a powerful argument to be made. My sense is it's probably going to get resolved in the courts, but I think what we have to focus on our side is we just got to win in 2024.
Yeah, you just got to win, and they'll do whatever it takes to win because that's the kind of people they are. So this is Jocelyn Benson, and she is the Secretary of State from Michigan, somebody who is going to be making a lot of these decisions in 2024. Here's what she says about this amendment.
Well, thanks for having me. I think this is a critical issue. It's an issue that is not going to go away anytime soon, and it's one we have to, and we are taking very seriously because the arguments for disqualification are quite strong. That said, there are counter arguments on the other side that recognize really the unprecedented moment that we're in and the timing of disqualification and the question of who exactly makes that determination. What is an insurrection or rebellion? What is giving aid or comfort? So all of that has really never been answered before, and it's never been answered by the courts. And that's why I do think that while election officials may make a determination on this issue, it will ultimately be resolved by the U.S. Supreme Court.
And is this something that you, in particular, your office in particular, would have to wade into when it comes to putting names on the ballot in the state of Michigan? And have you made any kind of determination at this point? Are you going to insert yourself into this and make that determination?
Well, we're going through this in a very methodical way, talking to legal scholars on all sides of the spectrum and really fleshing out all of the particulars. And I'm also in close contact with my colleagues in Nevada and Pennsylvania and Georgia and New Hampshire,
all the other
because we want to get this right. We recognize the weightiness of this decision. We recognize the importance of...
They're colluding and organizing their plan for what they're going to do so that they have some safety in numbers.
Our role as state officials in this moment. And we also have this ongoing question of timing. There's a decision about who gets on the primary ballot that will be made this fall in most states. But then there will be a secondary decision point if indeed this candidate is nominated by the Republican Party next summer. And so we also are seeing this unveil or evolve at the same time. These court proceedings are also evolving. So all of it has lots of variables, lots of moving pieces, but it requires us to take put serious attention into it, and that's what we're doing. We'll also likely ask our Attorney General to weigh in. And again, we're in conversation with others as well to see and to know where everyone else is at in terms of their own state law interpretation.
So they're going to write a giant book report. They're going to come up with a big binder of garbage. And we did a lot of research on this. And I'm really sorry to say this, but after extensive consultation with our Attorney General, numerous legal scholars, Encyclopedia Britannica, Wikipedia, I also called Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and they said it's a good idea. George Soros told me to. But I've done my research. The law is very clear, and I'm actually extremely sorry and saddened to say this today. But we have concluded that Trump did in fact commit an insurrection and made the tragic decision to address this unprecedented situation in our nation's history. We've made the decision to remove Trump from the ballot so that this never happens again. Unprecedented context, historical moment, blah, 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 right? All of it. And then they're just going to refer to their big binder. They're going to say, scholar, and then they're going to just collude together and they're going to do it. Look how excited she is. She's almost thrilled about it. She looks happy.
And okay, so it sounds like this is a work in progress. Is there a timeline at all as to when you might want to come up with an answer on this and make that kind of judgment call?
Yeah, ASAP.
Well, Nevada is the state that will be making the first determination on early October as to who goes on their primary or caucus ballot.
October.
And then Michigan and other states follow in November. And usually the process is determined for us in Michigan throughout November and finalized in December in terms of who's on the primary ballot. And there's another wrinkle as well in terms of how court cases resolve this and the timing of the actual printing of the ballots. If a court were to rule someone ineligible, how does that impact the printing of the ballot ballots and all these other details we have to consider. So it's a tight timeline, and that's why we really need the courts to engage and resolve this for all of us sooner rather than later. And so I think you can anticipate you'll see a lot of things happen over the next several months on this, with all of us recognizing that we may go through this a second time as court cases play out, as perhaps convictions get handled down, and perhaps is there a primary nomination process next summer through the conventions that we have to have an eye on as well.
Yep. So they're going to wait until Trump gets a conviction, and then any conviction, this is why they need the convictions to happen before the election. They need to get anything on the books. Any criminal conviction as a felony, well, maybe not any, but definitely the January 6th case. If they can get any Georgia or DC, which are both going to happen soon, any conviction, and arguably even a conviction of anybody else in the Trump orbit, okay? So even either 18 other co-defendants in Georgia, if even one of them gets a conviction, I think that they'll have the excuse, the cover to say, oh, no, look, I mean, clearly there was an insurrection, there was a conviction, and they may have a split in the courts. And if the Supreme Court adheres to the 2020 standard, which is we don't get involved in your state election garbage, right? Just we're going to stay out of it. You guys do what you want, which is basically what they did. Then Trump might not be on the ballot, right? You can just see how they're gaming it out. And she's telling you exactly what's happening here. She's walking us through it, saying a conviction might lead to something that the RNC decides to boot Trump. Maybe he's not even the nominee, right? Or a conviction is for a J6 event, which means we can keep him off the ballots and so on. They're gearing up for it. They're not going to let him just get on the ballot. Are you kidding?
And yesterday we spoke with conservative journalist David Frum, who was
all right. So that is Jocelyn Benson from the state of Michigan, and they are going, my friends. You can just see it. She's almost like salivating, exciting about it. Let me talk about what we're working on. It's their biggest project between now and 2024. And the reason they're doing all of this, the reason why they don't want him to be on the ballot, is because they're freaked out, man. They're concerned that he's going to win and that their candidate is like a sack of potatoes and he can't even speak or campaign. They recognize Trump is leading a movement and it is causing some serious consequences and concerns for them. Even Donna Brazil talks about this on ABC.
But I have to say something because, George, I'm old enough to say this. I've seen two movements outside of the social justice movements in my life on the political side. One was the Reagan movement. Reagan had a hold on his base, the country at large. They saw him as someone who was willing to stand up for American values, whatever that might have meant. Now, I thought it was reactionary. The other movement I saw was Barack Obama, hope and change. That galvanized the American people.
Yeah, that worked
I've
out.
never seen anything like this with Donald Trump.
Whoa.
I mean, what doesn't kill you make you stronger? I mean, being indicted, that's making him stronger, raising $10 million using an ugly mugshot. To raise money. This is a movement. And anyone who thinks that you can apply the old political rules to trying to defeat this candidate based on he's scary, he's ugly, whatever you might want to call him, this is a movement. And we have to respect the fact that it's a movement.
It is a movement. Trump looks handsome as hell, I think. He looks fabulous. One of the best mugshots I've ever seen, if not the best mugshot I've ever seen. So it is a pretty interesting admission here, saying this is a movement, and we can't use the old playbook. Did you hear she said that? Of course they can't, because they'll lose. Just like they had to do in 2020, to have the CIA and a bunch of people rig everything. Now they're going to do it again, or attempt to do it again. Old political playbook out the window, new political playbook. Democrats steal your right to vote away from you by taking your candidate off the ballot because they're petrified they're going to lose. Pathetic. My friends, we'll continue to cover here. Thank you for subscribing and liking this video wherever you're watching it, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.